It's Tuesday, July 16th, 2019. We're in the house of Judge Willie Perkins, Greenwood, Mississippi. This is an oral history project dealing with the 50 years of service at Mississippi Rural Legal Services. With me today, well, first of all, my name is Roy Berry, and with me, Jenny Gilmore, Morgan Cougarine, students Justin Gary, Ryan Parrish, Philip Paul, Dylan McKellar, Dave Chigard, Alexis Miller, and Sierra Tucker. George, it's just a pleasure to be in your home and also to be in Greenwood and to hear your story because your story is long and very distinguished.
You're welcome.
But we'll start by just asking a basic question: Who is Willie Perkins? Where was he born? Something about your early life, parents, school, that sort of thing.
Okay. You want me to just talk?
Yeah, just talk.
All right. Willie Perkins is the fourth child of the late S.C. Perkins Sr. and Docia May Perkins, born here in Lafleur County, Mississippi. My parents had 8 children, 6 boys and 2 girls, and I happened to be the fourth child in between the 2 girls. Parents had like 3rd or 4th grade education, but believed in education and stressed that with all 8 children. Went to school here in high school, graduated from Mandela High School in 1971, and from there I went to Toulouse College, completed 3.5 years with a double major, and did an internship with a lawyer in Forest, Mississippi, attorney Constance Slaughter Harvey, who's happened to be the first African American female to graduate from Ole Miss Law School, and from there to Ole Miss Law School.
Before we get to the law school again, you mentioned parents. What about your grandparents? Do you know basically whether your grandparents, your mother's parents, your dad's parents, whether they came from the Delta, and what did they do?
They came from the Delta, primarily were either farm workers or sharecroppers.
You mentioned that your parents did not have a high school diploma and did not go to college. Do you recall how they encouraged you and your siblings to go on to high school and college?
Well, you know, we got encouraged during them days by your butt being whipped if you didn't do your homework and got your lesson or you brought bad grades home. So we had the type of incentive, I guess, that folks don't get these days because of different other opportunities that are available to them.
You know, I grew up in the hill country, and of course the hill country is sort of different from the Delta, but as I drive through the Delta today, what was the Delta like when you were growing up? And just give us a picture of the Mississippi Delta, because that's a big term that people use.
Well, the Delta we saw it as a poor community. I guess blacks didn't have much share. Primarily you saw blacks working on farms, driving tractors and chopping cotton and picking cotton. And my father at some point was able to get a job with the city of Greenwood on the what they call it, garbage collection. They call it, well, at that time they called it street and sanitation, and now I think they call it some other glorified term, but that's basically what he was doing. And that was racist. You know, there was discrimination. There were certain things you were told not to do. You were told to get off the sidewalk when white folks was coming. You was told that you never look white folks in the eyes and all that kind of crazy stuff. And of course, I had a bad experience. At least my father did, and I just happened to be in the car where and I tell you this because this is one of my motivations for going to law school, because I saw unnecessary discrimination and treatment of African American folks. But on one Saturday afternoon, morning perhaps, and my father had I think it was about 5 of us, the siblings were in the vehicle. He was taking us to his mother house, which was on number 7. If y'all came in on number 7, you would have passed by that little area where she lived. And when he got on number 7, there was a black hitchhiker that my father stopped and gave a ride. As soon as the hitchhiker got in the car, there were two white males behind him, and they started rearing their car into my father. They started rear-ending my father's vehicle, and they had a gun pointed at him, and my father just stopped his car. They pulled beside his car, pointed the gun at him, and used the N word, and told him he better never stop in front of a white man again in his life. And the hitchhiker was begging, please don't kill us, we'll just pour N word. And I remember my sister and other brothers in the car that was hiding. I mean, they had laid down in the back seat screaming, don't kill my daddy. That point, I don't know if it was with fear, afraid, or what, but I was not leaning over in the car. And I think that stayed with me for a long time. And there was one other experience, not necessarily the racist part, but the reason why I went to law school. Decided to become a lawyer, because I decided to become a lawyer when I was like in the second or third grade. I went and I tell you, after 8, there was no room at the table for me to be one of my mother's favorite children at that time. We grew up where people said, this is my pet, or this is my favorite child. So I had to fall to the dad. There wasn't no room at the table to be my mother's favorite child. So I was my dad's favorite child, and I followed him everywhere. And he had a relative that sold illegally booze, what they call it, moonshine, all that stuff. And I remember we went to his house one day, and there were 2 guys on that side that had consumed too much of the alcohol. And they looked at me and asked me, boy, you in school? And I told them, yeah, because I was short for my age. And they said, well, what you want to be? You want to be a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer? And the lawyer just stood out. And then that came before the incident with my father. So when I went through high school, I used to carry a briefcase in high school, and I think there was not a question about what I would become when I grew up. And that stayed with me now. The dream came true. I went to law school.
Absolutely. Which was going to be another question I was going to ask you about what influenced your decision. But before I ask that question, because I think you've always answered that, I don't ask you this anybody else. But during that time of something called the Great Migration, a lot of blacks left the Delta to go to places like Chicago. Same was with mainly Chicago. Why did those people stay in the Delta and not make that trek to Chicago like so many other blacks on the Delta?
I really don't know. I can't answer that question. I can tell you that my mother also was from a large family as well as father. And my mother probably at that time had about her oldest sister, one of her oldest brother, and several relatives were in Chicago and Detroit. Why we never left? I guess too many children, man. Poor people with limited education and no employment other than farm working. And of course, I will say that my mother had leukemia, and I think she was used as a guinea pig by local white doctors here. Never got treated, and she passed my senior year of high school. I happened to spend the last night with her in the hospital when she passed.
So you mentioned the fact that incident was a contributing factor for your decision to go to law school at a very early age. Was there anybody else in your family that influenced that decision?
Well, during the time I grew up, and I will answer the question, I would say yes indirectly, but I will say this: we did not have any black professionals, very limited. I think there may have been 1 or 2 black doctors here, and he got involved with civil rights and the civil rights movement, and they ran him out of town to never return. So, and of course, Greenwood was one of the hotbed for civil rights movement. This is a place where dolls were first put on black protesters. The only black lawyer that I ever saw was Alex Sanders, and Alex was worked with Legal Service, was one of the executive directors, and he started the Legal Service program office here in Greenwood. I remember in my senior year of high school, I saw this black lawyer riding around in the community where we live on a motorcycle. I didn't really get to know him, but he's the only black lawyer that I knew growing up. And like now, young person aspiring to be a lawyer, you get a chance to go to the courtroom and see all that. No such thing when I came along.
So you mentioned your parents having a great influence, and you mentioned Alex. Is there anybody else that you can call in early years that had perhaps the greatest influence on your life decision to move in a certain direction?
Oh, I think it was motivated by racism. My incident to come back to change the condition to make certain that my parents or no one else that looked like me has to go through that kind of humiliation. And I will say this too, that my father had a vehicle on, and that's when we live on number 7, and he was on his way home at the turn to our home where he signaled right turn, an 18-wheeler hit his car, tore it up, injured him, and that was it. Nothing was done, no report, no claim, no nothing, because at those times, folks could do what they want to African Americans, and we had no source of relief or justice. I think things like that motivate me, and that's why I came straight back to Greenwood when I got out of law school.
I know you were with legal services in so many capacities, staff attorney, management attorney, chair of the board. How did you first get involved with Mississippi Rural Legal Services?
When I was a student at Ole Miss, William Joseph was the executive director, and you had Louis Myers, who was the director of litigation, and Al Chandler was in that era, and they hired me as I guess like an intern or a law clerk or whatever you call it. Oh, they put me on the payroll, I did some research and work, and they paid me some money. So I got involved from that point, and as soon as I graduated, I applied for, before graduation, I applied for a job with legal services.
While you were working there, intern, some of these people like you now are iconic terms in Mississippi, Louis Myers and Al Chandler. Was there any particular anecdotes that you could share with the next generation about how young people coming in contact with some of these people could be influenced? Do you recall anything that they said or did that it further encouraged you?
Well, I don't know if it's about encouragement, but I think, Al Chandler was the guy that worked hard. He started his work when everybody was getting ready to go to sleep. He'll call you late at night and talk and tell you what he needs done and blah, blah, blah. But that's just Al. Louis Myers, I thought, was a very sharp lawyer, but Lou was on the plane quite a bit, going to different places, and I think William Joseph was kind of like the firm person that helped the legal service program together, because North Mississippi Rural Legal Service was very aggressive. Had a lot of lawyers that like to do a divorce, no fault divorce, and go home, go to sleep for 10 hours, and then you had those lawyers who were dedicated to doing a lot of impact lawsuits, which kept you up late at night working. And there was Solomon Osborne, the Al Chandlers, Leonard McClellan, and let me see who else. Those are some of the main ones that we knew did a lot of impact lawsuit and litigation.
Given the fact that from reading your resume and what I know about you, you seem to be a workaholic and take your work very seriously. So what are the most important cases? I know, I want to ask you too, whether you know Ms. Qualls. I think she was a community activist in Oxford.
And she served on the board with me when I was legal service board director.
What are some of the most important cases that you worked on while you were involved in legal services? Both the one that we know about nationally, when we know about statewide, but some that you consider to be the most important that people may not know about.
Well, quite a bit. I consider all of them important. I'm sure my client did.
Okay.
But I say this: when I got out of law school in May 1978, I was assigned to the Greenwood Legal Service branch office. Solomon Osborne was the director. I think they called everybody director of that office. And as soon as I got here in May, Osborne was getting ready for a lawsuit, which was a class action lawsuit against City of Greenwood, brought by one of the paralegals, June Johnson. You probably heard about June quite a bit. And then there was a countersuit, Arlene Myers versus City of Greenwood, brought by Alex Sanders. So we were preparing for a trial that was to take place immediately. And man, we started working probably about get to work. I think I off work at 9. I always come in early, and Osborne is workaholic too. And we worked till 10, 11, 12 at night, getting prepared, calling witnesses, class action lawsuit. And I recall right after we got fully prepared, interviewed all our witnesses, ready to go to trial, the lawyer for the city called up and offered a settlement proposal that we eventually accepted. It was a pretty large settlement proposal. It caused a lot of the class members to receive money, and they entered into a affirmative action plan to not discriminate and to hire African Americans in different aspects of the city, because at that time, the only blacks working for the city were with the street sanitation, and few was with the what they call the wastewater treatment, and very few police officers and very few firemen.
Litigation.
Go ahead. No, I'm saying that was one, and that one resolved. And now, do you want to ask Courtney? Want me to continue to talk about it? Now that I don't claim that lawsuit. That's one that Osborne filed and worked up and prepared. I just happened to come in out of law school and start working with him on that one. Shortly after I joined the program, I think it's going to be like June or July, Solomon Osborne became the executive director of a new program down in Macomb, Southwest Mississippi Legal Service. And at that point, I was the only lawyer in the Greenwood office, and there was a debate, I'm told by the administration office of legal service who they're gonna put in charge, and eventually they decided that they would name me as the acting director of the office, and about maybe 3 or 4 months later, they made me the permanent director of the Greenwood branch office of North Mississippi Legal Service. There was probably one other case, and of course Osborne had some pending lawsuit when he went to Macomb that he came back and done. One of them was Horton versus Ball and Piano Company. Ball and Piano Company is one of the biggest employers in this area, and that's where they do the pianos and organs, and they are based out of Ohio. And we went to trial on that case, and did we go to trial? We may have settled that case also, but we did. That case was settled. But after that, he left, and then I discovered a case that he had filed that I had get the dust off the file and start working on it. It was David Jordan, James Moore, Samuel E. Chestnut, and Robert Sims versus the city of Greenwood, Mississippi. It was filed by Mr. Osborne. It was a lawsuit to change the form of government in Greenwood. Probably, David probably tell you, maybe Osborne tell you, this may be one of the biggest, because at that time, we had a city government where you had a mayor, a commissioner of fire and police, and a commissioner of street and sanitation, and all three were elected at large. Everybody in Greenwood would vote for them, and everybody got elected was a white male. And that suit challenged the form of government, and we had to show that it discriminated against African Americans and would not allow African Americans to participate fully in the electoral process, and it diminished their voting strength by everybody voting at large, because there was racial polarization. The dividing line in Greenwood was North Greenwood, the Yazoo River that way, and no blacks lived over there. They voted in full concentration. If they had a choice between me and a stop sign in an election contest, that stop sign would win over North Greenwood. That was just the reality. And We went to court right before we got ready to go to court, and I prepared the case. Brought in different kind of experts, Dr. Lauren from Tougaloo College, and I brought in I can't think of this doctor name from Southern University in Baton Rouge. Each one did some type of study, and there was several expert witnesses, and that was one of the good things at the time. Legal Service did allow resources so you could hire experts so that you can prepare and try cases. Because I know the regulations have changed now. These type of cases could not even be brought by legal service program. But we went right before we got to trial. The United States Supreme Court decided a case, Mobile versus Bolden versus Mobile, which was an at-large election challenge lawsuit in the city of Mobile, and the Supreme Court changed the standards to prove intentional discrimination, which made it harder for the to meet our burden. We went to trial probably for about a week, assisted by Solomon Osborne and Leonard McClellan, who's not deceased. And after trial, Judge Katie entered an order ruling against us. We appealed it to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal. Let me just note that at that time, there was similar lawsuit being filed. There was a lawsuit against the city of Jackson, city of Hattiesburg, city of Meridian, city of Greenville to attacking the at-large scheme. And we went to the Fifth Circuit. The Fifth Circuit reversed and remanded the case back to Judge Katie in the Northern District of Mississippi Federal Court. And upon remand, the United States Department of Justice came in and intervened as plaintiff on our side. And shortly thereafter, we ended up agreeing that there was no need to, and I will say this too, Congress went back and reinstated by law those elements to prove intentional discrimination that was in effect before the Supreme Court changed the standard. And so we had that in our favor, and then in 1984, they agreed to submit to Judge Katie some proposed findings of fact as opposed to going back through another trial. And based upon those proposed findings of fact, Judge Katie ruled that the Greenwood former government discriminates, deny African Americans the right to vote, and throughout the scheme. And from that point, we redrew some lines where we took the city of Greenwood, drew 7 wards, required residence requirement in each ward, and the first election we had 3 African Americans elected and 4 whites, 3 Democrats and 1 white Democrat, and 3 Republicans out of North Greenwood. And it boiled down that the mayor at the time was a Democrat, and the Democrats decided to work together, the 3 blacks and the 1 white. And as a result, I became the first black city prosecuting attorney when they took office in July 1985.
So that was all part of the collective effort. I would assume that Cruikshank would have been involved. So it looked like that Senator Cruikshank from down in Jackson, he was not involved in this at all.
No. He worked with Frank Parker, with the city of Jackson, and Frank Parker with the Lawyers Committee on a lot of other occasions, including the legislative redistricting plan, but he never worked with me on
so a lot of this one dealt with the redistricting, voting rights. By the way, did the Voting Rights Act, when Congress went back and we did some of that mentioned before about the at-large, was there any change in the Voting Rights Act, or that just stayed the same at that point?
The 80, we talking about 84. There was in 1982, my recollection that the Congress extended the Voting Rights Act. I don't recall any changes in the Voting Rights Act other than to say, see, there were several criteria to prove that a form of government denied African American right to vote or participate in the process. You had to show racial polarization. We could show that. In an election, we can go back and show that anytime there was African American on the ballot, they got 0 votes in North Greenwood. So we could show the racial polarization. There was a history of discrimination, one element. We could show that. We go back to the period of time when African American was not even allowed to register to vote. We had lawsuits where Osborne had filed a lawsuit before I got out of law school, suing the city for not providing, they call it equalization lawsuit, equal treatments in the black community versus white. That's in terms of streets, sidewalks, lights, all those type of facilities. The infrastructure in the black community was totally different, paved roads and all that. So he had been successful on that, was able to show the employment discrimination lawsuit. So we can show the history, but what the Supreme Court has said, you got to show two things, one or two things. One, that the form of government was originated for the sole purpose of denying blacks the right to vote. But when this form of government, we went back to 1914 when the form of government changed here. Before then, we had 4 wards: the North Ward, East Ward, South Ward, and West Ward. And they changed it in 1914. We went back, I had some Valley State students, went through newspapers, trying to find some comments that were made. The only thing we come up with some statement made about it was nigger in the woodpile, and Judge Cater didn't buy that as being the smoking gun. So if we couldn't prove that it was originated for the purpose of keeping blacks out of city government, then the next thing you can prove that it was maintained for that purpose. But before I got out of law school, Senator David Jordan, the Greenwood Voters League, they did a referendum to change the form of government. They got all the signatures and signed it, and they presented it to the city to hold an election to determine whether or not the city of Greenwood should maintain this form of government or change it. And in that process, it was like a campaign. There was a white Klansman lawyer, that Hyde McLean, that I call him a Klansman lawyer, but that's the way he acted, that came forth and gave reason why we should keep the form of government. And then you had Senator Jordan in the order giving a reason why we should change it. And when they went to the poll, the vote was strictly on racial lines again. The African Americans were outnumbered. The referendum failed. So that was a test to use to go to court to say it was maintained for a racial purpose.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Look, let's talk a little bit about legal services. In those days, clearly legal services could do class action. When do you recall that change where you could no longer, whether at the time you were down on the board, or did it change before then?
It changed after I left the program. I left the program on the date that my mother passed, February 19, 1985, and that's when I went into private practice. After I left, it ended because I did a lot of class action lawsuits, lawsuits against nursing home, police brutality. I did several other changes in the form of government, and did a class action lawsuit to redistrict the county, where LaFleur County, just like City of Greenwood, only had one district that would elect a black supervisor, and all of the black population was in that district. That was B4. That's where Alex Sanders got elected, and we redistricted the county after the 1980 census. I believe filed a lawsuit because the Board of Supervisors refused to redistrict, and from that lawsuit, which we didn't get resolved until 1984, I believe. The next election, we got 3 African Americans elected to the Board of Supervisors, and to date we have 4 out of 5 on the Full County Board of Supervisors. On the City of Greenwood today, we have 5 out of 2 African Americans on the city government. And of course, you probably know my wife.
Exactly.
Okay, did become the first African American mayor, as well as the first female mayor of City of Greenwood. Yeah.
On this issue of legal services again, so when you came back to legal services, do you feel that by not being able to do class action, it had been gutted, and that legal service that you had remember before, and the legal services you now see that you served on as a board member, that it lost some of this effectiveness because it could no longer?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. I mean, class action is a method that where you can really, for example, when I mentioned to you about Osborne case and cases I've had where when lawyers on the other side realize that you got a case prepared with a lot of folks getting ready to go to trial, you may not have, but you may have, say, 15 class members to come forward and only and give testimony. If you can get 3 of them to show that they was discriminated against, denied a job, then the city's exposed, and once they exposed, you're able to collect attorney fees. Although they went to the program and they go to the individual. But yeah, it was a powerful weapon to bring about changes if you prepared your case and you did your homework. Now, if you just file and sit there and don't do anything, it's obvious you're not going anywhere. But yeah, that hurt the program substantially, and I do remember the political power when Ronald Reagan got into office, president, and the Republican Party started chipping away against the legal service program and what they could do. And for example, the Ayers case was there when Ike Madison came to legal service with the Ayers versus what governor was it? No, somebody else. Ayers versus, it could have been Winters or somebody. Winters maybe in 1980. And he brought it to, and that's how the Greenville office, my understanding, got started when Attorney Isaiah Madison brought the Ayers case to North Mississippi Rural Legal Service. And it was a class action office, and at some point, before we got to sell it, Congress has changed regulation to say that program legal service couldn't handle those kind of cases, and you could lose your funding. And so Ayers, being seller, not a legal service case.
That's right.
Yeah.
Funding. Well, what about the funding structure? You mentioned the funding. The political stuff obviously changed. What about the funding structure? Did that change?
It was up and down. Our legal service corporation is received its funding from Congress. We used to worry quite often whether or not legal service was on the plate. I remember that when Ronald Reagan became president, he set up some, what was that committee? I can't think of these what's some folks' name that own Coors? It's some think tank that they had where they was who? The Harris family. Yeah, Harris family. They wanted to dismantle legal service, and that was always been an issue. So our local state congressman didn't support legal service. They did a lot of things that caused legal service to be limited in what it could do. Class action can no longer be brought. You can no longer sue governmental entities. Let's see what else. So there was a lot of changes, and quite frankly, I'm not sure how long I would have stayed with legal service if I would have come to legal service and could only do a divorce or a name change or adoption, because that didn't, you don't grow from that.
Right. In the interest of time, you have been, obviously you covered the spectrum: law school, Tupelo College, state rep, private sector, legal services, now a judge. As you summarize, your life and your activities, both in the private sector and in the public sector, what kind of impact has the work with legal services had on your life? When you talk about your parents obviously having a big influence, how has that worked over the years, both in terms of working as a staff person, but then coming back as a board member? What kind of impact has that experience had?
You be honest with you, I'm not sure if it's the program has an impact or is it the individual.
Okay.
Because I can tell you, I work with legal service, and when I was at some point I got appointed to be a regional director before I left, and I was over he wouldn't give me Greenwood office, which I been. I was given Greenville office, Clarksdale, and Cleveland, and we had to go to those offices more like administrative end to monitor, see what type of cases the lawyers or the managing attorney in those offices was doing. And I said director earlier, but it's managing attorney was the appropriate position headed. I found that there were, and I won't call names, a managing attorney in the office.
Well, you can call names.
I won't.
Because this is for the future.
I won't. And the lawyer, managing attorney, whole office had about 5 cases, and 2 or 3 of them were referred out to to private attorneys. And I was saying, well, what are you doing? And it was like, well, I'm managing. And I said, well, what the hell are you managing? 2 cases in your office, 3 gone. So that was an example of a lawyer that was just not motivated to do nothing but draw whatever salary. And salary was not a motivation. I can tell you that now at all. So I think you have to be committed to the cause and committed to work hard. And when you see people's in need and suffering, and particularly in the community, like I can tell you this, I came home one Friday about 6:30, probably one early time for me to go home. And I think my wife was cooking then, and we didn't have our first child. And before I could take a bite out of my meal, I had somebody banging on the door saying that their son had gone to a high school football game and got arrested, and they got illegally beaten up or something. So I left and went to the office. I made contact, called folks, and I started just drafting a petition to have that person released from jail. I interrupted the secretary and brought them in about, looked like it may have been like 8 or 9 p.m. on a Friday evening. And we filed a petition, woke up a justice court judge, and got him to sign something to get this guy out of jail. Most time I would have told him, see you Monday, come tomorrow. Well, not me, but that's what folks would have said, see you Monday, come to the office on Monday, we'll see what we can do. And so I think it's commitment and then by the way, the person ended up turning it against me somewhere down the line later on, but that's neither here nor there. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a commitment, and if you're committed to represent poor people who are in need, who could not otherwise seek justice, I think it's an individual. And I will say that there was good leadership from Willie James Perkins.
If legal services had not existed, and say Willie Perkins had now been on the scene to be part of this activity, how would some of the other Mississippi cities, what would they look like? I think you've already said Greenwood would look very differently. What would some of the other?
I'm not going to say that because I'm not a person that's tired of egos and stuff, and I don't.
What about just legal services that had not existed?
Oh, I think a lot of folks would have suffered, and rights have been trampled over, and they wouldn't have had any redress. I think we'd have looked like third world countries, and rights have been taken over. Kids been locked up, discriminated against, and we probably would not make that much. Would not have made as much as progress as we have to this day.
What would you say to a future generation of people, high school kids, middle school kids, elementary school kids, like students like we have today, when there's always a question between the private sector and the public sector? And I know it's a choice for them, but is there a role for people in the private sector to work in or public sector, to work in an agency like legal services now and make a difference, a huge difference in their community or their state? Or would you say you just go your own way and make a difference?
Well,
I know it's individual choice, but
Yeah.
and I'm not asking you necessarily to give advice, but I'm going to ask you to give advice. What would you say to those people?
I just say whatever you do, you put yourself into it, be focused, and work hard, and be honest and truthful to yourself and to the cause.